We're taking on the massive My Hero Academia iceberg, and you're not going to believe how much of an effort this is about to be. Because as a manga with nearly 400 chapters and now 6 seasons of anime, My Hero Academia has a lot of lost details and information that not everyone may know about. Horikoshi is an author that excels at telling a complex story and packaging it in a way that can be read very simply on the surface level, but the deeper you dive, the more hidden meaning you find, like a delicious breadcrumb trail of adventure that Horikoshi is leaving for us to follow. Which is what makes My Hero Academia's iceberg such an interesting one to explain, because this is really about to go deep. This video is inspired by the many icebergs that you might have seen online about various topics, but especially New World Review's take on his Hunter x Hunter iceberg, which I've really enjoyed watching, and now I want to give my own spin on it for my audience. But if you're a Hunter x Hunter fan, make sure to check out his iceberg, which I've linked in the comments section below. For ours though, let's start off with the very top of the iceberg, the surface tier, beginning with Horikoshi's obsession with Star Wars. When opening up the first page of My Hero Academia, one of the first things that you may notice besides all the stuff going on is that the location that the events are taking place in is known as Tatooine Station. So that means that My Hero Academia and Star Wars both begin on Tatooine. And this is something that continues throughout the story of My Hero Academia, with a lot of names of locations and attacks being references to things in Star Wars. We see it repeatedly with different locations, and also with Mirio's Phantom Menace attack, which is directly the name of one of the Star Wars movies. There's also of course the fact that Ojiro pretty much dresses just like Luke. All for One has a mask and a vibe very similar to Darth Vader's. And of course there's even the visual references to Star Wars, like Deku on the cover of this volume of My Hero Academia during the Culture Festival arc. Besides that, we've seen that Horikoshi actually did an official artwork for one of the Star Wars movies more recently. I believe this is for The Last Jedi. And another thing to take note of with this whole Star Wars thing is that the structure of My Hero Academia is actually pretty similar to Star Wars, showing just how much of a fan Horikoshi is. Deku, All Might, and Gran Torino's mentor and student relationship mirrors Luke, Obi-Wan, and Yoda, and Deku even shares 3 letters with the word Luke, with the L switched out for a D and scrambled around. What makes this name even better though is the meaning behind Deku, but we'll discuss that in a moment. Horikoshi's love for Japanese comics. My Hero Academia is clearly heavily inspired by American comics, and this was especially evident much earlier on in its run. Horikoshi drew several iconic Marvel and DC heroes in Chapter 1, where we see Spider-Man, Superman, and Wolverine, alongside Japanese heroes like Ultraman and Moonlight Mask. Horikoshi has also told us that he was a massive fan of Ryan Stegman and Dan Slott's Superior Spider-Man run, and that he buys Japanese translated versions of comics. Now when it comes for the MCU, we saw that Horikoshi actually did a collab art for the Infinity War or Endgame posters featuring characters from My Hero Academia taking the place of the characters from the Marvel movies. And when No Way Home came out, Horikoshi definitely had some really positive things to say about that film. It's clear that Spider-Man is a big inspiration for Deku and several other heroes in Horikoshi's version of Japan, and in general Horikoshi seems to really like characters that get powers from animal-like abilities, with another one of his favorite characters in My Hero Academia being a character named Mirko, who gets her powers from being like a bunny. And this is partially likely because of a manga that Horikoshi's done in the past, but it also likely ties to his love of Spider-Man. Now like we've said, Horikoshi has done official art for the Avengers movies, but he's also been graced to have some of the biggest names in American comics doing art collabs for My Hero Academia. We've seen art by legends like Ryan Stegman, who we just mentioned, who made 2 separate pieces for My Hero Academia Volume 30 featuring Dabi and Shigaraki looking really menacing, and another piece for My Hero Academia World Heroes Mission featuring Deku versus the film's main villain. We also have this alternate cover by DC comic artist George Jimenez featuring Deku and Lemillion back during the craze of Season 4, and lastly we have art from the legendary Invincible artist Ryan Ottley featuring Endeavor, All Might, and the USJ Nomu. Westaboo All Might. All Might seems to love everything American, and of course in story this comes from his time in America after the death of Nana Shimura, but many fans believe that All Might's entire American persona and his love of the West actually comes from Horikoshi's love of American culture that we just discussed. Another interesting thing about this association with America is that All Might's attacks are named after states, and of course he has a very caricatured American comic style, but there's also potentially a lot of symbolism people have pointed out in the number #1 hero. Of course, All Might is an iconic figure in Japan who wears American flag colors and uses the power of the states to defeat Japanese villains. And there are a few interesting Reddit threads about the symbolism tied to that along of Japan, the US, and World War II, which is really an event that shaped the anime and manga industry in Japan, as it's one of the reasons why manga and anime even exist. Now, enough about Horikoshi, we've reached the part of the iceberg where we're going to be talking about Deku, because there are actually some interesting things to know about the character. First off, we have the meaning of the name Deku. The meaning of Deku's name is actually something that often gets lost in translation for American viewers, since interpretations of Japanese characters and their etymology can be pretty complex and interesting, but it's hard to necessarily translate that to other languages in a quick fashion during an episode. Deku's literal meaning is puppet, but it can also mean a person without the disposition to be useful, useless, boring person, a word to speak ill of such person. The first definition is in reference to a series of old Japanese puppets with no arms and stumpy heads, which go back thousands of years. This could be a reference to the fact that Deku is the latest in the line of the one-for-all users. Deku's useless was originally an insult meant to be a reference to him being quirkless and not being able to do anything, but when he meets Ochako, she says that his nickname reminds her of the word Dekido, which means can do, changing the meaning of Deku from someone that's useless and can't do anything to someone that can do anything. It's also true that you can pronounce the character that makes up the Izu in Izuku and read it as De, which when you fuse it with the other half of his name Ku, just is the word Deku. So it's really just also a way of shortening his name, or saying it a different way. And that makes me really think like, oof. I wonder if that means whoever named Deku secretly saw him as useless. I mean, that definitely didn't come from Inko, but perhaps that would make sense if his father is who we truly think he is, but that's a discussion for later. Jack Midoriya. Before the creation of My Hero Academia, Horikoshi created a one-shot titled My Hero, featuring a character named Jack Midoriya, who in many ways is the prototype for My Hero Academia's main character, Izuku Midoriya. According to Horikoshi, the following is one of my one-shots. It came out in the 2008 winter issue of Akamaru Jump, and it's called My Hero. Since the main character is a salaryman, it's not terribly suited to a shonen magazine. However, this one-shot is, to me, my foremost masterpiece. If I can brag, this was my peak. If I ever get the chance, I want to draw it out all again. That's how emotionally attached to it I am. The feel and the art style are both quite different from my last manga, but please give it a read. This one-shot ultimately went on to become My Hero Academia, with characters like Snipe making it into the full series after things were a little reworked. In the story, Jack Midoriya is a normal guy who sells items for a superhero company, so he works for a company like Detnarat and he tries to get superheroes to sign on with his company, but secretly he wants to be a hero himself. So you can see how this might have been a prototype for a sort of quirkless Deku type story, but Horikoshi did thankfully get the chance to draw it all out again in the now 380 plus chapter manga, My Hero Academia. So it's good to see all the passion that he had for it back then becoming this massive empire with its own iceberg. Traitor Theories. There have been many theories on who the UA traitor was over the course of the series before it was ultimately revealed in the manga. Some of the theories range from being highly logical to outright insane, but here are just a couple. There was a theory that Toru Hagakure was the traitor, and that all along, she was actually Himiko Toga in disguise. Toru has had a high level of suspicion on her ever since the USJ incident, where she and Aoyama went missing and we didn't know where they went. This theory takes loops and turns, like twice cloning Toga to make this possible, and the clone developing its own personality. It's just really crazy, but eventually it was revealed not to be the case. I myself had a theory that Deku might actually be the traitor without really knowing it, because All For One seemed to have a sort of odd connection to One For All, where he knew every time Deku dreamed and interacted with the first user. So it was plausible to me at the time to theorize that All For One is getting more than just that information from Deku's One For All, and that Deku could accidentally be leaking information to the villains, with him being the traitor unknowingly. Lastly, we saw a lot of Kaminari traitor theories based on people feeling like an electric quirk user should have way more potential than Kaminari seems to have, paired with aspects of his personality that just seemed like they'd fit well for a traitorous character. This would have been a shocker, but it seemed all but confirmed for some when it looked like Kaminari did a Liberation Army symbol after the events of My Villain Academia. Thankfully, like the others, Kaminari proved that he was loyal to the side of the heroes and never snaked his friends. Dabi is Touya Todoroki. This is perhaps the most popular theory in the My Hero Academia fandom and the most well known. The moment Dabi was introduced, people speculated that he and Todoroki Shoto had some sort of tie. But over the course of the series, it just kept building and building. Eventually, we would get the reveal that Dabi was in fact Touya Todoroki in the infamous Dabi's dance moment in the anime and manga. And ever since then, Touya has just been on a tear for the Todoroki family, trying to burn away everything that's precious to them. This has developed from just a fan theory into one of the biggest plot points going on in My Hero Academia, even getting main stage focus in the final arc. And many fans say that Horikoshi's handling of Dabi and the Todoroki family plotline is one of the shining stars of My Hero. The full story of Dabi's past and how he became who he is today is up right now on my channel, so check it out in the card on the top right. Deku's doctor. In the beginning of the series, we saw Deku in a doctor's office being told that he had no quirk, and eventually as the series went on, we'd be greeted by the mysterious silhouette of a character who looked very similar to Deku's doctor, working for All For One in the shadows. This was eventually revealed to be one and the same character, with Dr. Garaki being All For One's right-hand man and his biggest enabler. Now, whether or not it was just a coincidence that this is the doctor that Deku went to, we don't really know, but we do know that the doctor was running clinics all over Japan where he would take people and turn them into the beings called Nomu, and it seems like he even did this to his own grandson, a boy that both Deku and Bakugo grew up with. So maybe Deku is lucky that he wasn't born with a quirk, because he would have been directly in this doctor's sights. Many theorize that the opposite is true though, and Deku was born with a quirk, but somehow this doctor stole it. But there's currently not much evidence for that in the story yet. And with the doctor now arrested and put away, it's not really known or likely that we're going to get more information on that plot point unless it comes directly from All For One himself. The normal Nomu. Speaking of the doctor, he is directly responsible for the Nomu, and while the details of the full Nomu program and its actual purpose is something that we'll discuss later, the Nomu themselves are past humans who've been repurposed into tools and fighting creatures, fusing the quirk factors of different people into one base personality to create the perfect being for a specific task. These creatures are part of the force that the League of Villains uses to up their numbers for various operations throughout the beginning of the story, but there's a period of time where they become much less active. Beyond appearing sporadically here and there until we find the high-end Nomus, one of the first major villains of the series was a Nomu during the USJ incident, and now after going through a very similar process, one of the final villains in the series, Shigaraki, is more or less a Nomu in many ways, which is a very interesting parallel. Hero 2. During My Hero Academia Season 4's Culture Festival arc, it was decided that the UA students would put on a performance for the school and Eri to lift up everyone's spirits after some heavy events in the manga. This also had the meta purpose of lifting up the spirits of the readers, because Horikoshi felt like after such a dark and intense arc with the Overhaul arc, he wanted to raise the mood and offer a more hopeful vibe. This was accomplished with the amazing performance of the song Hero 2 by Class 1A that wowed the entire school and broke the hold that Overhaul had over Eri. The song though wasn't actually performed by Jiro's voice actress, and instead they asked singer Chrissy Constanza, an American singer from New Jersey who actually does YouTube. Now when Chrissy was later interviewed on the Rock Sound YouTube channel, she had this to say about doing the song and how it all came together.
I think that came through our Japanese label, and they knew that I'm learning Japanese. I loved being in Japan. It's like one of my favorite places ever. And yeah, so I think when they heard about it, they put my name in, and it just like felt like a very natural collab. I don't know, I was just like, it was such a cool little thing, and because she's like in a band and like playing at her school show thing, it was kind of very appropriate too, so it worked out really well, and I was really excited.
My Hero Academia Vigilantes. My Hero Academia is only part of the empire that Horikoshi built, with successful spin-offs being part of the pyramid. My Hero Academia Vigilantes Volume 1 released on April 4th in 2017, and it's set a few years behind the original My Hero Academia story, following another character set in Japan who has a quirk that allows him to glide along surfaces, and it depicts the adventures that he gets into as a vigilante in the streets of Japan, while our cast of recognizable characters like All Might, Aizawa, and others make appearances to remind us that this is very very much taking place not so far away or so long from our main story. Koichi, our main character, is also a massive All Might fanboy, and his costume is literally an All Might sweater from his closet, a kind of sweater that I'm sure Deku would really want for himself since Koichi has all the limited edition variants as well. There are many similarities and parallels between characters in MHA and Vigilantes, like Knuckle Duster and All Might being one of the key ones, but Vigilantes has also introduced concepts that were later used in My Hero Academia, like the quirk-enhancing substance Trigger, which first appeared in the spin-off before being used in the overhaul arc of the main series. Another fun fact is that several Vigilantes manga covers are directly based off of My Hero Academia manga volume covers, and I'll show those right here. Now, with the series now over and MHA ending, many fans still speculate that Koichi may make an appearance in My Hero Academia before it ends, just to bring everything full circle. Since of course Deku very briefly appeared in Chapter 1 of Vigilantes in a skit where they introduced the concept of what a vigilante is to Class 1A. And of course this series was written by Hideyuki Furuhashi and drawn by the artist Betancourt, and the manga ran in Jump Giga and Shonen Jump Plus respectively until it ended in 2022. My Hero Academia Team-Up Missions. Vigilantes isn't the only My Hero Academia spin-off, because we also have My Hero Academia Team-Up Missions, which began in July 2019. The series is drawn and written by Yoko Akiyama, and instead of going for a completely original story with new characters just set in the same world, this series ventures to give us more time with the characters that we already know, by covering the advent of a team-up mission program between heroes, which causes many of our characters to end up doing hero missions and formations that you normally wouldn't see together, like Deku and Momo or Bakugo and Hawks, giving this manga a very clear appeal to fans of the original series. Team-Up Missions is a lot harder to read compared to Vigilantes, which was always up to date when it was running. There are volumes of Team-Up Mission, and I believe the first volume is available to read on Viz Online, with you being able to find 9 chapters there. However, I believe there are 30 plus chapters of this series, with most of the chapters still having yet to be translated. It isn't completely clear if My Hero Academia Team-Up Missions is supposed to be considered canon, but I don't think that there's anything in the series that would necessarily break My Hero Academia canon, so I think it's safe to consider it canon, especially since it's done by one of Horikoshi's assistants, and he's praised the series and pushed it up on his own as part of the Hero Network. Are the movies canon? Speaking of breaking canon, the My Hero Academia movies present an interesting argument among fans who were split on the debate on whether or not the films are considered canon or faithful to the actual plot. And there's often argument about whether taking the events of the movies and applying them to the story would really make any sense at all. This argument happened over the course of the story as the movies were released, with some sources saying the movies aren't canon and others claiming them to indeed be canon. And for those that don't know what canon is, it's pretty much just arguing whether or not it actually takes place in the story of My Hero Academia, or if it takes place in like a parallel universe where we're just watching the characters for that period of time in the movie or in whatever other source that we're watching them in. With the release of My Hero Academia Heroes Rising, the second film of the trilogy of movies, Funimation released statements outright telling customers that the movie wasn't canon and it didn't spoil anything for the upcoming season, when in fact this was incorrect and started a wave of confusion that was never present for the movie's original release in Japan. Horikoshi himself has said multiple times that the movies take place in the same story as the main work, and he's taken steps in the story to include more aspects of the films in the original work, so this can no longer really be questioned. Some examples of this are the fact that Star and Stripe from the World's Strongest Woman mini arc in the manga is originally a character that we saw All Might save during the flashback we saw of young All Might from the first film, My Hero Academia The Two Heroes. 9 from Heroes Rising was first teased in the manga when Shigaraki discussed all the things he wants to destroy after meeting the Doctor, and we can actually see 9 on the page floating in a similar pod to what Shigaraki was floating in during the first war arc. Afterwards, when Shigaraki proves himself to Gigantomachia during the events of My Villain Academia, the Doctor tells Shigaraki that before giving him everything he's asked for, there's one more thing that he needs the League to do. Following this, we have the events of Heroes Rising, where the League is seen transporting 9 at the beginning of the film, and this was clearly the task that the Doctor had for the League, since we never saw them doing a favor for him after this dialogue in the manga. After the events of the movie take place, the Doctor then gives Shigaraki the quirk surgery in the manga, making Shigaraki an even more perfect version of 9, who was a beta for Shigaraki. Lastly, after Deku and Shigaraki shared One for All in Heroes Rising, it seemed like the movie worked very quickly to backtrack on Bakugo having any lingering attachment to the quirk after the events of his final battle against 9. However, in the manga, when Bakugo faces a key crisis, he does indeed see All Might's One for All vestige in its fiery form in his own sort of vestige world. So that further concretes the events of that movie as canon, because otherwise Bakugo in the manga would have no attachment to One for All directly for him to have seen this vision. The My Hero Academia games. My Hero Academia has had movies and spin-offs, but it doesn't just stop there. The series has also had a number of games. My Hero Academia Battle for All was a game that was released for the DS before the first episode of My Hero Academia's anime even aired. The interesting thing about this game is that not only does it feature the core roster of Class 1A students in a 2D fighting game set during the first season of the anime, but in this game, Shigaraki actually starts off with white hair, because the developers didn't base his appearance off of the anime designs that gave him blue hair, and instead went with Horikoshi's actual art that all featured Shigaraki with white hair, outside of the one volume cover that the anime team drew his blue hair from, where there's a blue background that would obviously be casting light on his white hair, making the anime version of Shigaraki's hair likely an error all along. My Hero Academia would go on to get games like Smash Tap, Smash Rising, Ultra Impact, and The Strongest Hero, which are all mobile titles. Smash Tap was discontinued and changed in the Smash Rising with some updates, but ultimately that game ended as well, leaving us with Ultra Impact, a mobile game by Bandai with a lot of constant support. And we also have The Strongest Hero, which I believe is owned or published by Sony in the West, and originally created by a Chinese company. And this game features a sort of open world gameplay with more impressive character models and fluid gameplay than the turn-based structure of Ultra Impact, but less characters overall. The main series of games for My Hero Academia are the One's Justice anime arena fighter titles, of which there are 2. Many fans enjoy these games, while others feel the combat is extremely lacking, leading to fan-made projects that completely change the balance of the games in an attempt to make them more fun and competitive, called One's Justice Remix. In the near future, or maybe even by the time that you're watching this video, there's also the game My Hero Academia Ultra Rumble, which may be one of the last games this series ever gets. In this battle royale game, you choose one of many heroes or villains, and then spawn on a map alone or with your squad of friends, to travel through UA's USJ Center and battle other heroes and villains to ultimately come out on top. Now, I played the beta of the game and it was really fun, and after some balance patches and a full-scale release, I'm hoping to try it out on the channel. Popularity polls. My Hero Academia has had 8 popularity polls over the course of its run in Weekly Shonen Jump, and people often have fun of the characters that end up on these lists and in which order they appear. Deku has only ever won the very first popularity poll, with Bakugo coming in first place in every subsequent poll. Often we also see Shoto in the top 10, and characters like Endeavor, Hawks, and Ida have given themselves solid places in the top 10 as well. Of course, in any sort of public vote like this, there are also bound to be characters that get votes that don't necessarily make any sense, and MHA is no different. People have voted for very funny things like Deku's shoes, Pikachu, Mega Man, Horikoshi and his mascot, and even Naruto. Mineta hate. One of the most hated characters in the entire history of the series is Minoru Mineta, a short character in Class 1A that makes up part of our extended main cast. People have gone far of their hate of this character, drawing all sorts of fan art, taking him out in fan fictions, and even making petitions to have him just outright removed from the series. Now, Mineta deservedly gets hate for most of the series for being a needlessly perverted comic relief character who played a very cowardly and small role in the class. But over time, it seems like the hate for this character has lessened as he's gotten much less perverted in the series. But still, if you're a fan of Mineta and this fandom, I would just keep that to yourself, honestly. And maybe you might want to look for a better role model. Now, all of this here is only the first layer of our iceberg. Only the stuff on the very surface that you might not know about. So this is really going to take a while to comb through, but stick around because I promise the obscure craziness that we're going to discuss and the things that this fandom have done will honestly shock you in our next part.